do the intro.
I can do the intro, okay. Hi, everyone. Can you listen to me? Okay. So, good morning. Welcome to MVP Community Days. My name is Marcos. My colleague here is Dave. We are both MVPs. And this session, so before start, we have a contest. So the best picture and tweet with that tag wins a Surface Pro. So the only thing that you have to do is the back picture and the tweet with that tag or hashtag, it will win.
I'll translate that. The best picture tweet on Twitter will win a Surface Pro.
So the evaluation as well, you have the link over there. And you can win as well the Windows 8 and Office.
Is your deck rolling by itself there, Marcos? Because if that's the case, you're going to have to speak really fast.
You have 30 seconds on each slide.
Awesome. Our contact information is up there for Twitter. If you guys have any questions at all before or after during the session, feel free to reach out. We're a big part of the community, so if you guys have any questions surrounding virtualization, SharePoint, workloads, anything in general, feel free, come up and ask us questions, and we're here to help you.
Yeah. So this session is the same that both presented Microsoft Tech Heads in Houston, and the feedback that we got was incredible, and so we decided to present again on MVP Days. So the story of this why presenting this session is we both have a lot of experience in the field regarding deploying SharePoint, virtualizing other solutions than SharePoint, but virtualization in a whole. And all the time when we're going to our clients or our customers, we always ask or we always answer the same questions. And why we should use this, what is the best practice to just virtualize X product or B product. And in this case was SharePoint, because I did a lot of last months, basically the last 20 months deployments of SharePoint, and we just used that as a model because it was the most fresh information. But it applies for basically any kind of product. In this case, is tuned for SharePoint. So on the agenda, we are covering the 4 main topics: the planning, deployment, monitoring, and protection. Okay? So this is the 4 main topics that you need when you want to virtualize the SharePoint with 7.2012 R2. So on the planning phase, this is just to give you an idea how is going the virtualization of the platform. So virtualizing SQL, for example, or virtualizing a SharePoint farm is basically composed on 2 products. One is SQL for hosting database, and the other is SharePoint. So there is a lab, or in this case a study that they did, that ESG Labs did, that was regarding the performance. And the only thing that they did see is the difference be virtualizing SQL or having a physical is only 6.3%. So now, at this present moment, you don't see the huge difference of deploying a SQL on a physical box or a virtual machine. So you only have a 6.3%. And sometimes the cost of having a SQL box on a physical machine, it's too high and doesn't compensate. The other thing that they did is you can increase, in some cases, 6 times the performance can be increased. Then 5 times the improvement on transactional response, because everything it stays on the same layer, you can have 5 times. And additional features like SR virtualization, virtual fiber channel, and virtual NUMA as well can always increase, that you don't have that on the physical side. On the other hand, they did the same exactly study with SharePoint. So on SharePoint, what they use only one physical server, okay, only one physical Hyper-V based on SSDs with mirror space, storage space. And what they did is they deploy 5 VMs. 3 VMs were the web front end of SharePoint. 1 VM were the app, the index in this case, and 1 SQL VM. So those 5 VMs running on the same Hyper-V box. So what they achieved with this was 1.3 million of heavy users. So by heavy users, what they have is 60 requests per hour. So if you try to benchmark your environment of SharePoint, this is a really heavy user. So basically what you have is 60 users or 60 requests per hour, and you have 1.3 million users accessing that platform with only that specs. 3 web front ends, 1 index, and 1 SQL. Nothing else, okay? Then what they did see is the response time for the SharePoint is 0.08 seconds. So when you load the page, it's just loading on these time frames, so very fast. We already know that SharePoint sometimes is tricky because depends on the web parts that you already have, especially on the web on the initial page. But this was standard across the same platform. It was tested and on different kinds of tests. So this is what they kind of it was the output with 230 requests per second was the output regarding this.
So this is actually a really interesting read, and so Marcos has the link available in the slide deck.
Exactly.
So I really encourage everybody to go through this after the show, read through it. It's a good baseline. Start learning about how to virtualize some of these application workloads. So it's a really good read.
And if you already work with SharePoint, you will see on the bottom of the graph that the specs of the virtual machine. So 8 CPUs, 12 gig of RAM for a SharePoint is sometimes nothing. I have SharePoint farms that having 24 gigs of RAM, and sometimes I don't have that kind of benchmarks. I know that it can be different reasons. One of them is all the code that you are just landing on the default page. Okay, so this is the lab, the ESG lab. So it's available, the full report after you download the PPTs. They did decide to see, okay, how we can push this further. So they did decide to do the scalable and performance tests. So instead of having 3 web front ends, they decide to move to 5 web front ends. By moving that, they see a huge scalability and performance from moving from 1.3 million every requests to over 2 million requests. That is a huge significance on the performance. So then they started to see another VMs, but they didn't see the growth that they see from the 3 VMs to the 5 VMs on this study. And let me remind you, it's on the same physical server, on the same Hyper-V. And the version, and the curious part of this is we are talking about the previous version of Hyper-V. So we're talking about the tests running 2012, not 2012 R2. And there are lots of improvements regarding performance. Okay? This is a totally independent test by ESG Labs. Okay? You can download the reports. So let's start. It's just to give you a heads up how the virtualization can be healthy for you guys. So now let's start with architecture guidance. Dave, can you help with this?
Oh, if I turn my mic on, probably I can. Awesome. Okay, so when we take a look at virtualizing workloads, I think one of the key points here is that, what we're going to discuss today is not necessarily 100% specific to just SharePoint. Some of this is general guidance for virtualizing any application workload that's going to sit on top of your hypervisor. And it actually doesn't even matter which hypervisor you're going to be running on. You could be running on a VMware platform, you could be running on a Hyper-V platform. The general rules and guidance applies typically across both of these. Interestingly enough, when we presented this session in Saskatoon, we got quite a few head nods from the audience that they picked up some little gold nuggets going through this particular slide. So hopefully you guys are able to pick up a few new things here as well. So the first thing is your logical processor to virtual processor ratios. You really need to be careful with how you take and you scale your application workloads, specifically with SharePoint. You want to take and watch the ratio to logical to physical processors that you're allocating to those SharePoint guest VMs. Over allocating CPUs is typically a very bad idea when you virtualize things like this. So just for example, if you've got a Hyper-V host server and it gives you a pull-down checkbox to add 16 virtual CPUs, you're probably going to actually degrade your performance on that application instead of actually improving it. So our general rule of guidance that we have here is that you should always check with your vendor's spec to make sure that you're taking and you're falling within best practices and in line here, right? And Marcos and I will typically go into customer sites, and this is one of the first things that we look at when a customer's complaining that, hey, my application workload's slow, my CPU's pinned all the time. We just want to check to make sure that somebody hasn't tried to tweak things to speed them up, and all of a sudden they went from 2 virtual processors inside to like 8, and now all of a sudden performance went into the tank. You have to be very, very careful with your allocation. You can also take and configure your weights and reserves and stuff like that on there as well, and make sure that those are configured. Inside a Hyper-V, there's different guidance that we have available for dynamic memory configurations dependent on what your workloads are. So I just want to get a show of hands for how many of you in the room here use Hyper-V today. So we've got a few. How many of you guys use VMware? So probably a lot of the rest. Okay, perfect, got a good split. So in both platforms, you're probably familiar with memory ballooning and having the ability to take and over-allocate memory and having dynamic allocations of memory. Microsoft has the same type of concept. We call it dynamic memory inside of Hyper-V. But one of the things that you have to watch out for is you have to take and you have to watch out for your application platform support regarding dynamic memory. So for example, it's not a good idea to take and use dynamic memory on a SQL server, yet it is acceptable to use it on or it's not acceptable to use it on a SharePoint server, but it is acceptable to use it on a SQL server. Marcus is telling me to hurry up here because apparently I talk too long and then I run him out of time for the back half of his deck. Okay, so just to quickly go through the rest of these, make sure that you're setting up synthetic network adapters. We do have full support for VMQ and ServeIO in that configuration. You can also use in-guest teaming if you're connecting to a dual-core configuration right within your guests. And Windows Server 2012 R2 fully supports network QoS built right into the virtual adapters, so you should really take a look at that for a configuration as well. Also, when you configure your VMs, you want to take a look at using fixed VHDX format files. This is a general best practice that Marcos and I have. You can get away with having dynamic virtual disks. The only problem is you run into over-provisioning issues. The performance difference between a fixed VHD and VHDX versus a dynamically expanding one is negligible. There's not that much of a difference there from a performance standpoint. But it's just general best practice, so you don't want to run yourself out of disk space. One that's near and dear to Marcos and I heart is snapshots. Do not use these in production. This is not a way to back up your servers. When you click on the checkpoint or snapshot button inside of Hyper-V, it actually creates a separate file, an AVHD file that checkpoint is stored in. The contents and memory are stored there, and you can actually degrade your performance. And you can take, and if you break those chains, you can have big problems with your Hyper-V in production. There's one other really cool component that came with Server 2012 R2, which was a shared VHDX. So how many of you guys have used Windows clustering before to make your workloads highly available? So I might have a couple, all right? So when you take and you set up failover clustering, you typically need to have shared disks. In Windows Server 2012, we can actually allocate a shared VHDX file right within the file system so that you don't have a reliance on the underlying storage. And this is a really cool way to set this up, and it's fully supported in a production environment as well. So your reliance on the underlying storage is kind of gone at that point in time. And then the last thing is you've got a flavor of the week for your disk and your array configurations. We're seeing a lot of customers using Hyper-V over SMB and having absolutely amazing performance coming off of the underlying storage arrays or connecting to direct attached storage. And the last thing on this one here is solid state's your friend. Give your workloads as much I/O as you possibly can. All right. So I'll throw this back to you, Marcos, for your SharePoint high availability.
Okay. Regarding the SharePoint,
he has to kick me when I present, because otherwise I talk for too long.
the SharePoint high availability is another topic that sometimes when you try to design or planning, it's a key point. So on the 3 tiers that you have to be able to evaluate what level of high availability or performance that you want. So regarding the SQL, on this case database, you can use the feature, the SQL always on, that is available since 2012, I think. And you can use the failover cluster instance to just basically have your farms over those SQL servers. Then you can again use the application layer or the index server and the search query to just use the load balancing and the redundancy that you want for your SharePoint farm. And the most common one is the web front end. So every single user will connect to this, as you see on the report that we just give you. It's the same exactly thing. So you want to just load or kind of spread the load across different servers, because then you are able to just doing all the high availability that you want. Back to you.
I better mic back up here. Okay, so when we took and we built this deck, one of the requests that we had from customers was if we could take and put together some of our kind of top 8 or top 10 things that we saw from the field. And so we decided to do that in a couple of slides here for just the general best practices surrounding Hyper-V. One of the things I want to remind you is that this is not necessarily specific to SharePoint. It's anything that you're going to be running inside of Microsoft Hypervisor. So the first one is that when Marcos and I go into customer sites, we typically find that the host hypervisors, the parent host machines, are over allocated. People forget to set their host reserves to give the OS that's actually running that hypervisor enough room. So what they'll do is they'll max out that box at like 99% memory utilization, and then there's not enough room to do anything on it. File copies are slow. Windows Explorer is slow. You want to make sure you set the reserves adequately, and the minimum recommendation from Microsoft, Marcos, is what? It's something like 4 gigs of RAM minimum. And so we recommend setting at a minimum of 6 gigs of RAM. Honestly, guys, this is not a problem. Most of these host servers you're building today, they're probably coming stock with 128 to 256 gigs of RAM anyways. So this is a nominal number that you're going to be looking at, but don't forget to do this. The second thing is you want to make sure that you have a minimum of 2 physical adapters. Now, the guidance here is interesting. Most of you are probably looking at this one here and saying, 2 adapters for a Hyper-V host server? How are you getting away with that? How are you building all your converged networks with 2 adapters? And the answer to this is very simple. We want you to be looking at 10 gig converged infrastructure. And if you have 10 gig converged infrastructure, Microsoft fully supports in-box software teaming on those adapters, and you can run all of your virtual networks across them. So you can get away with 2 physical 10 gig adapters. My guidance, though, typically when I do my designs, that would be at a bare minimum,
Yeah.
would be 4 10 gig adapters. Because you still want to, I still like to segment my storage networks from my front-facing networks and my client networks, and it's just a way that I like to do it in my designs. All right. So the next thing is the minimum amount of networks inside of your design. So most of you, when you're taking and you're building your virtualization solutions, you're going to take and have a minimum amount of networks or VLANs or segmentations that you're going to have for controlling the traffic. So the first network that you're going to take and that you're going to be configuring is going to be for your host traffic. So that's going to be for your host or your management network. The second network that you're going to be having is for your live migration. If you're from VMware, you'd know this as like a vMotion network. You want to segment that traffic. The third one's going to be for cluster shared volumes. So this one here is going to be for the inter-cluster communication traffic. You want to have that segmented as well. And then the fourth one is going to typically be for iSCSI or your storage network. And so that's normally the typical design that we have. But now with Server 2012 R2's ability to actively run virtual machines using the SMB3 protocol, so we can basically access Hyper-V virtual machines by doing nothing more than pointing to a UNC file share, / server name, share name, and we can run those VMs there. I like to create a 5th network in there as well for SMB, because I may have some virtual machines that I'm running on iSCSI and I may have some that I'm running directly over the network. I still like to segment that traffic, because although it is running over SMB, I still want to try to control where that traffic is actually pulling from, if possible. Depends on your network design. The next one is using the inbox teaming drivers that Microsoft provides. How many of you guys, by a show of hands, have taken a look at Server 2012 NIC teaming? Has anybody looked at this? It's pretty good. The nice thing about it, if you have looked at it, it's fully supported by Microsoft. So if you have issues with teaming drivers, you can pick up the bat phone and you can phone Microsoft and they will support you. They will answer your phone call in regards to teaming drivers and teaming issues. How many of you in the past had physical servers where you had issues with like HP or Dell or Intel teaming drivers and something went wrong and you had to take and try to phone in for support? Well, this is what would happen when you tried to phone in for support on that call. The first thing that would happen would be, number 1, you'd phone your platform vendor. Number 2, if it was Microsoft, they'd say go back to the other vendor that took and wrote those drivers, because we have no responsibility for that driver stack and how it integrates in. So now the nice thing is that we do have full support for this, and you're seeing huge performance benefits and increases for this. And we do fully support guest teaming as well inside of the guest OSs. The next one is, you do not want to take and use a Hyper-V host server for anything else except for Hyper-V. How many of you have heard of the licensing model from Microsoft, where you can buy a copy of Microsoft's Data Center Edition for the servers, and you get what are called unlimited virtualization rights within it? That means you can run as many virtual machines as you can possibly stack on that host server, as long as they're not desktop class OSs, as long as they're servers, and as long as they're kind of a lower version underneath what you've purchased. The way that the licensing rules are going to read, if you read inside the fine print, thou shalt not use that host server as a domain controller, as a DHCP server, as anything else except for Hyper-V. It's also a really bad idea to do that as well. We've seen tons of people in their designs thinking, oh, well, I need some physical components running on my network. I'm just going to put it on my host server at the branch office. Not a good idea. You want to take and leave that host server alone. Leave it what it is designed to be, which is running as your core hypervisor. Okay, so then the next thing is watch where you're actually storing your host files on the file system. Make sure that you're taking and you change the default paths in Hyper-V. By default, it's going to try to put VMs into your profiles. Change those paths, make sure that they're going to the right directories. And then, as we mentioned in the other slide, you just want to make sure that you're not oversubscribing your CPUs. And then making sure that you're watching your snapshots. There's horror stories that we've all heard where snapshots have gone wrong in production. So our rule of thumb is just don't. There's really good backup technologies that are out there for Hyper-V, and in all honesty, just make sure that you're just not using snapshots at all in production. Awesome. So is this one mine too, Marcos, the configuration?
Yes.
I think so. Perfect. Okay, so when we look at the actual configuration of the Hyper-V host server itself, we want to take and we want to be careful with how we set up our antivirus software that's going to be running on our servers. So I think most of you have rules in your organizations where you have to run antivirus on servers and desktops and everything. You have no choice. It has to be done. And if that is the case, there are published antivirus exclusion rules available for you for Hyper-V. It's like any other workload that you have on the network today. For example, you set up an Exchange server. You've got antivirus exclusion rules for Exchange. You've got antivirus exclusion rules for SQL, for SharePoint. Hyper-V is no different for you. If you're going to run antivirus on a host server, it's no problem. It's fully supported. Just make sure that you're going to take and you're going to set up your antivirus exclusion rules appropriately. Make sure that you've got hardware that does support second-level address translation. And if your hardware is going to support it, enable hyper-threading for that extra little kind of performance boost. And then the last one was is try to seriously look at the converged 10 gig infrastructure. How many of you guys are still on gig infrastructure in your data center? A lot of you still on gig infrastructure in your data center? How many of you are looking actively at 10 gig? Check out the price point difference between the 10 gig and the gig infrastructure now, because you're gonna really cut down your port count inside of your data center. So instead of having 10, 12 cables coming out of the back of each of these host servers to build all your networks appropriately and get the bandwidth that you're looking for, now you'll have 2 or 4 cables coming out of the back. It's way easier to manage, and it's way easier to design, grow, and scale. If you just add up the port count and the count that it's gonna cost for building this, that's going to be a huge one. And now the last one, that's my personal favorite, is patching your Hyper-V servers. When you build a Hyper-V server, you have to take and you have to have these things being patched, no different than any other Windows workload. Most people think they'll go to Windows Update, they'll update the machine, they'll take and they'll use WSUS, or they'll use another patching mechanism to patch these Hyper-V host servers. Wrong. There's specific hotfixes and specific updates that are for specific roles that Hyper-V runs. And these get released on a schedule. Microsoft publishes an active hotfix list so that you have to actually download these. Anybody that's tried to patch a Hyper-V host server in the past probably doesn't think this is a very fun process, having to go to the Microsoft website, sign up with your email, having them email you a link for the hotfix, clicking on the link for the hotfix, downloading the hotfix, extracting the hotfix, and then applying the hotfix. That's probably not so much fun, is it? Especially if you've got, like for example, in Windows 2012, you could have up to 20 of those that you have to do. So if you guys check on my blog, www.checkyourlogs.net, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys access to a script. I'm going to do some posts after the show. We've customized some scripts that were built inside of the community that will download your hotfixes based on an XML file from Microsoft. They'll extract them into a working folder, and then they'll install them for you. So if you have a configuration drift that you're seeing on your Hyper-V host servers, you can just run my script and get things up to date. And if a new hotfix does come available, simply just change the XML file, add it to the list, done. It's a living artifact for you. It'll save you tons and tons of time. That's normally a little gold nugget that most people pick up coming out of this session, for sure.
I blog it as well, the way that you can not implement it, but you can see what is the hotfix that you need. Because sometimes finding those hotfixes, it's quite easy, but you know if it's not applicable to your cluster or not. So we both blog about this. In my case, I did blog how to find the right hotfix very easily. So it's only a matter, it's everything automated, it's going there. So deployment phase. Now that Dave almost consumed everything, and we have only 400 slides to go in less than 10 minutes, I've tried to just keep it up a little bit faster. Okay, so deployment. The way to deploy SharePoint, basically we have a few. One of them, the most usual one, is manual. So the server next finish that Microsoft have give us for 40 years, something like that, it's available. So next finish, you deploy everything on SharePoint. But if you want to start the automation piece, and me and Dave, we have this rule that if you're doing more than 3 times, we want to automate, and you will see on the next session how to automate the deployment of Hyper-V in less than 20 minutes with the challenge.
Yeah, we've got a special challenge
So
demo coming
just
up in the next session.
just stay here and you will see it. You starting to use the deployment kits. So this one, the MDT, it's a free one that you can starting to automate even the entire piece from the OS until the SharePoint. You can do it. You can use one of the power ones, that is the configuration manager, one of the components of System Center. You can use that as well. Or if you are deploying a virtualization platform, and most of you guys are already doing this, you can use Virtual Machine Manager. And in this particular case, you can use one of the components inside the Virtual Machine Manager that I will show you in a few minutes, called service templates. Okay, it's very useful for this kind of deployments. And of course, you can combine the Virtual Machine Manager with Orchestrator and have the full automated way to deploy this. Even lists, even the entire customization of SharePoint with your web parts, import web parts, and everything else, you can do it with Orchestrator. Okay? So as I mentioned previously, this is the service templates inside of Virtual Machine Manager. So this is an example. We are deploying here on the picture, we are deploying a 3-tier SharePoint. So basically, I'm deploying a bunch of web front ends, one index, and one SQL Server, for example. I can deploy a cluster of SQL Server if I want. On this case, this is a service template. So basically, this can be used for a single server. You can create a service template for a single server. You have the 3 tiers on the same server, or you can start to segregate the tiers accordingly or for your needs. So then, inside of service templates, for example, you can starting to punch all of your scripts that you need to automate the process. So annotated installation inside of service template is available, and you can use this for deploying on-demand new farms, testing, VR, wherever you want to use it. It's very useful. It's very useful, this one. The other way to do it, on a most like a cloud fashion way, is use the SharePoint as infrastructure as a service. So on this case, is showing is the Azure portal. So if you are familiar with Azure, this is the same portal, correct? Okay? But good news, it isn't. So this portal is exactly the same, but it's on your data center. So it's on premises. This is what we call Windows Azure Pack. It's free, so you can download it and customize it on your needs. And basically what you're having is exactly the same experience that you have on Azure, and you can choose where to deploy, on premises or in Azure if you want. So it's exactly the same, but the same look like of Azure, but you can have the power of deploying inside.
We're seeing a lot of customers inside of the enterprise space in Western Canada looking at this specifically because they may not be able to use Azure just because of where the data is stored today, but they love the look and feel of Azure. So what this is going to do is this is going to reskin your cloud with that Azure look and feel. And it's relatively straightforward to deploy and get demos set up.
Yeah.
Both Marcos and I do a lot of work directly with Microsoft, so they'll bring us in to help with some pre-sales and talk with customers. And so this is a big hot button with a lot of customers. So if you're going to look at something after this show, make sure you check this out. This is a really big one for 2014.
So, and then you have all the good features of Azure, like the pre-populated gallery. So Microsoft come with all the pre-populated gallery that you can have a lot of image already ready to deploy. This is happening in Azure already. You can have as well on your infrastructure because WAP, in this case Windows Azure Pack, integrates with Virtual Machine Manager easily. Then you have VM roles available for different roles on your VMs, different specifications, and you can see exactly the same thing. This is one of my views that I really like on Azure is I can see the performance of my server on those dashboards. And you can have exactly the same rich experience on Windows Azure Pack. So one of the things that I'm always keen when I'm doing a deployment is, okay, we did the deployment phase, awesome. So now how are you going to monitoring? How are you going to evaluate if your deployment it's good or not? The monitoring phase here with SCOM, it's doing a key thing on your environment. So System Center Operation Manager have a deep visibility. This is the look and feel of the integration pack. So integration pack, the management pack is nothing more than a collection of rules and thresholds that's already come by default by Microsoft. You can always tweak it for your environment, and you have the entire organization of your SharePoint farm on this environment. So you can see what's happening, what errors that you have. And inside of those management packs, you already have some knowledge from the alerts that's coming. So if alerts coming on a SharePoint related to a specific threshold, already incorporated on that management pack come all the steps that you need to do to verify why the alert is coming, and then you can resolve that issue. Okay? So health, service outages, performance, and even link with the new service that Microsoft, not new, but recently updated service that Microsoft have, System Center Advisor. You can even see against the Microsoft best practices to all the knowledge base that they have if your environment is really, really well installed regarding the best practices as well. Because sometimes the way that you deploy, it's not the same way that the best practice advise you to do, and that at least you have a guidance for that. Okay? So one of the things that I really like on Operations Manager, and this seems to be the same opinion on the customer, especially the CIOs, is dashboards. So with the management pack, out of the box came a lot of dashboards. For example, you can even customize. This is an example of one. Easily, you can see all the components of your SharePoint farm and where is the problem, for example. Another one is if you are deploying and if you have a ginormous organization across the world, you can see where is your problems or where you're having problems regarding your organization. Okay? Another thing that you can see is the performance dashboards. So this is very keen for us to see how our SharePoint or our solution is performant. So this is another dashboard that you can have with the management pack. And it's great because it's very intuitive. If you have any problem, sometimes you just click, depending on the dashboard, you click on it and give you all the problems that you're having. It's really, really easy to navigate and really easy to use.
I think something to reiterate here is Marcos's deep experience in Microsoft System Center Operations Manager. He's currently on a contract right now with a customer, very large oil and gas customer inside of Calgary, multinational. He's setting this up for what, about 2,500 servers right now?
Almost 4,000.
4,000 servers, sorry. And so if you guys have any questions in regards to the back-end data center, SCOM, orchestrator, anything like that, Marcos is your guy. He knows his stuff around this. So come catch him during the break and have a discussion with him around this.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. So installing, just to see how quick and how easy it is to install the management pack, you just click, we call it import management pack. We just import, select the management pack, it appears everything that it needs, and then just press install. It's what I love about Microsoft, is the simplicity of the next finish across the board since almost I born. Because I've only 19, sorry. I did 18 last year, sure. Okay, so one of the key points that I always want to give to you guys is those nuggets that we have across our implementations. And one of them, it's very important on the management pack, is the run as account. Okay? The run as account is important because it's the account that is giving access, that you are giving access on the SharePoint to just monitoring every single component. So sometimes when you just deploy or import the management pack, you need to do some kind of tweak. This one is the most important one. A lot of the customers that I have say that they starting to have an error, saying that they cannot see any kind of results or alerts from the management pack, especially for SharePoint. It's one of them. It's they don't have the run as account set up. It's very simple to do. Just go there and say, hey, this is the account that you have permissions, or that this SCOM have permissions to monitoring. You don't need to give like the full access. It's only the run as account, and all the password is inside of encrypted inside of SCOM. So regarding all the password protection and the permissions, if you have audit, it's a good way to set up this. Protection phase, so the last phase. With the protection, you have a lot of other implementations that you can do regarding the protection. One of them that I like is DPM, Data Protection Manager. Data Protection Manager, you can have the entire organization, as you can see here on the picture, just protect by a click. And the good thing of this is use VSS, and this is the tool that Microsoft built to just protect your Microsoft solution. So it's totally integrated, 100% integrated, and is really, really good to use. And one of the things that I really like, and one is the best practice that is coming now, is doing the backup to the cloud. So with Data Protection Manager, what you can do is you can use the 25 terabytes of SharePoint to protect on Azure. So by doing this, you just click on that checkbox over there, and the last bit of the backups is going to be synchronized to the cloud. Okay, don't expect like the full first backup. It's going to be on the cloud in a matter of seconds. Otherwise, if you have a very good connection, it can help you. But on this, by doing a simple checkbox, your disk to cloud, it's enabled. Okay, and it's using the resource that you're having. And as you know, using the storage, in this case on Azure, it's really, really cheap to just use this as a outside or as out office way to just the backup.
We don't say cheap, we say cost effective.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so in conclusion, All the SharePoints can be virtualized with Hyper-V. Okay, so all the sequels as well. So right now you have a lots of articles saying this and supporting this. And sometimes the curious part of this is you will see that there is some articles depending on the application that you have better benchmarks on the virtual than a physical one. Okay, so it's very interesting this part. SQL 2014 is already there and is best to update, but to doing this you need to upgrade your SharePoint to SP1. Okay, so 2013, if you're deploying, it can be used on 2012. If you deploy with SP1, the most recent version, you can use 2014. Okay, then SharePoint 2013 works best, of course, with Hyper-V. With all the nuggets that we give, with all the experience that we give, it's really working well. And SharePoint with System Center, it's protected, it's well protected. So even disaster recovery, I can test a disaster recovery on the scenario that you saw on a couple slides ago, and I can test that in a matter of minutes. So testing disaster recovery has always been a challenge, and with this, you can deploy it, or you can test it without any kind of problems in a matter of minutes, just to see how good is your DR plan. And of course, with Windows Server both together and System Center R2, just use this as well.
Awesome.
Any other question?
No, and we're pretty
Nope.
much right on time.
So, questions?
Any questions?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead. The decks will be available afterwards. Yeah, we'll put up the links. And the sessions are being recorded live as well. And so those will be available post-production. Yeah.
So we want to thank you, our sponsors, because without them, this event, this awesome event, is not be possible. Okay. And just a quick reminder that the best picture and tweet, say I right this time?
You got it right, yeah.
Okay. With that hashtag, you can win the Surface Pro. And with the complete evaluation, you can win as well a Windows 8 and Windows and Office 365. Okay? So thank you.
Thanks, guys. So our next session will start here at, I think we're going at 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
So we've got a couple minutes if you want to grab a coffee and stuff. You don't want to miss this one, though, because we've got a really special demo set up.
I have to take that out.